guys, I'm Kristen. Welcome back to my channel. I've got tea steeping, I'm in my comfy chair, and that means I am ready to talk about my recent reads. At the time of filming, this is almost towards the end of September, but since I've been kind of really loving not doing a monthly TBR video, and I've been really struggling with my monthly wrap-ups to feel like I have enough time to talk about each of the books in enough depth that I want to, I've just decided to also kind of get rid of monthly wrap-ups as well, at least for the time being, and switch over to more of a recent read. So with these new wrap-up style videos, essentially I am going to make one every time I finish 5 books, and that way I feel like I can have at least a little bit of time to talk about each book in the way that I want to. For this first one, I am over that 5 book mark. So you'll forgive me, I have 8 books to talk about today, I think. And then from now on, all of the recent reads videos will come up every time I finish 5 books. So I'm gonna start off this recent reads with 2 books that were actually from August, the first of which was 6 Crimson Cranes. I was really looking forward to 6 Crimson Cranes because it is a young adult fantasy retelling of one of my favorite fantasy stories, and that is the 6 Swan Brothers or the 7 Swan Brothers, whatever iteration you've heard of that fairy tale. And it's also the fairy tale that is retold in my favorite book ever, Daughter of the Forest. I feel like having it be the same fairy tale as Daughter of the Forest maybe was the wrong comparison to make going into reading this book, even though Daughter of the Forest is adult and 6 Crimson Cranes is young adult, so there's already a little bit of a different vibe going on from there. But then that combined with just the amount of hype that went into this book leading up to it, I feel like maybe led me to not enjoy this book as much as I was expecting to. In terms of the vibe, if you read the Spin the Dawn duology by Elizabeth Lim, and you really liked it, I would definitely then consider checking out 6 Crimson Cranes. I thought they had a really similar vibe and tone and energy to the book. If anything, 6 Crimson Cranes was a little bit more lighthearted. In terms of the story components, I thought that there were a few interesting things that Elizabeth Lim did differently than Juliet Marillier with this fairy tale retelling. I did think that this read a lot more towards the younger side of young adults, and that's just a preference thing in terms of whether or not you'll like that, but it definitely reads a lot younger. And in that regards, I feel like some of the elements within the book were quite silly, and not really silly in a way that was enjoyable to me. Like, for example, her identity is hidden by having a walnut bowl stuck over top of her head and face, and that just didn't really seem feasible. People think weird things about her because of that, but also it just was really weird. There are also some things at the beginning where she doesn't take the curse seriously, and so she gets a lot of like, oh no, really don't talk, nope, don't say it, nope, this is your final warning. And that felt like a little bit too easy to sort of let her off with. I do think I just had a lot of personal expectations in going into this book, and it was really hyped up a lot within the book community, and I don't know if it completely lived up to the expectations that I had. Overall, I thought that the book was fine and I enjoyed reading it, but I was comparing it to Daughter of the Forest the whole time, and Spin the Dawn, which I felt like was very similar in feel and in writing style, and that's just obviously Elizabeth Lim's writing style, which is fine. And then the other book that I forgot to mention in my August wrap-up was Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. This is a novella that I was able to read with my classical book club from back in Toronto, and when I was home, they were meeting and reading this book, and I was able to read and meet with them. I will say right off the bat, if you really enjoy the movie, there are a lot of differences in plot and vibe than in the movie. So for example, the book is not a romance whatsoever. Overall, I did really enjoy reading this novella. It was a nice, quick, light read. The writing is a little bit distant, especially because there's almost no connection with the main character or like the narrator with like who is telling us this story. He's never named. He'll occasionally mention that like there's stuff going on in his life, but he doesn't go into any detail. So we know nothing about the narrator from whose point of view we're seeing the story. And it is almost exclusively focused on all of his interactions with Holly Golightly. Holly is what is called a cafe society girl, I believe, and this is someone who is trying to have all of their bills taken care for, like having their whole life paid for by older male benefactors. And in the movie, there is some doubt and question as to what is or isn't happening in that situation. And the book is actually a lot more upfront about what is definitely happening. She is very clearly a charismatic person, or someone who everyone around her seems drawn to, despite the fact that she's actually a quite unlikable character. The impression from other members of my book club was really varied. Everyone generally really enjoyed it. And the writing style is one of those ones where it's a little bit distant and more vague about what is happening from a descriptive standpoint. And it was really interesting to see how each of us caught or missed different components, and also how we interpreted things differently. This is definitely a great book club book, actually, if you are looking for something for a book club of yours. However, I will just make a quick note that this book was published in the 50s, and there are some rather shocking racial and homophobic words used all throughout the book. So something to consider if you are thinking about reading this book or recommending it for book club. Now jumping into some of the books that I read in September, we'll start off with the romance books. I am finding that when I'm in the mood for romance books, I am really in the mood. So I'll read one and then I'll read a bunch, and I'll kind of overdo it and not want to read another romance book in a really long time. Right at the beginning of September, I finished up the Central Park Pact. The first one was Marriage on Madison Avenue, which I talked about in my August wrap-up. The premise for this series is that these three women were all seeing the same man, and when he dies in a yachting accident, they all find out about each of the others. And they actually make a pact to protect each other from future a-holes and to sort of pre-screen each other's potential guys going forward. The first book, Passion on Park Avenue, follows Naomi. The setup for this book is the main character, Naomi, is an extremely successful self-made businesswoman, and she moves into a building that she actually lived in when she was younger for 1 year. And in this building, she runs into a boy from her past who she didn't get along with, but he doesn't recognize her, and there is very clearly immediate attraction and really great chemistry between the two, but Naomi can't really get over what happened between them in the past when they were children. And that's kind of the whole setup for the book. This one was okay. It was an interesting take on a hate to love romance where the hate was more about something that happened a long time in the past that we're not doing any flashbacks, we're not reliving that, and less about how they actually feel about each other in the moment. And this is a closed door romance book, as is Marriage on Madison Avenue. The second book in the series, and then the final one from this series that I read, was Love on Lexington, and this follows Claire, who was the person who was married to the man who died. And the setup here is sort of an opposites attract situation with the contractor that she hires to remodel her home. She is also sort of trying to get back into the dating scene a year after the death of her husband, but she wants to keep things a little bit more on the casual side, and she specifically is looking to have a fling, and she gets the guy, the contractor, who is sort of a notorious one woman in every city sort of a guy, to be her wingman and to help her. This one I liked the least out of this whole series. I didn't really get the attraction between the two people. It didn't really seem like they had anything in common or that there was anything really there between them. And it went surprisingly less into how she was feeling from a grief perspective as well as a betrayal perspective with the situation from the husband. And so I thought that there's a lot of stuff there emotionally, and that was surprisingly light on that, although there was a very cathartic bonfire scene with the three women. I did really enjoy this series. I thought it was really surprisingly light and fun considering the situation with the three women. And it was just a really nice series to kind of putter through. It was really great to see the friendship as it grows over the course of time with each of the three books. I also, in September, continued to read the Beautiful Bastard series by Christina Lauren. Beautiful Stranger follows Sarah, who is one of the best friends of the girl in the first book. And again, with this book, similar to the first one, Beautiful Bastard, there is an intimacy scene right out of the gates in the first chapter. Sarah is getting over a really public, very bad breakup. So she meets this very attractive British guy at a bar. They do sleep together at the bar, and then they sort of engage on like a we're just sleeping together only kind of a relationship that is very fun. There is a very particular kink in this book, which is exhibitionism. I have really found lately that I'm really appreciating when romance books or shows or whatever it is are beginning to show more of the breadth of experiences within sexual intimacy or sexual experiences that people have and can enjoy. I like that books can be a way of normalizing different experiences and interests. And so while not all of these books have my particular kinks or, you know, your particular kinks, I hope that people can appreciate that there are people who are into this and that that's okay. I'm getting into a weird like sex ed talk here. Beautiful Stranger was my favorite out of all of the Beautiful Bastard books. I thought the dynamic between Sarah and, I'm forgetting his name, I think it might be Max, something with an M. I thought they had great chemistry, and I really liked that she was just kind of taking what she needed out of this relationship and kind of steering it in that way. The third book, Beautiful Player, is definitely my, I think, the least favorite, although obviously Beautiful Bastard was really problematic. I thought Beautiful Player was just kind of boring. The setup for this one is our geeky and work-obsessed main character, Hannah, is encouraged by her brother to get out more, to have more of a social life, and they ask the brother's best friend, Will, to help her out. Will is also really good friends with the two main male characters from the first two books, and so that's how this is all connected. This one was less right into the smut than the other two, and it did have much more of your standard romance novel pacing compared to the other two books. I did like that they seemed to really be into each other. They had really great chemistry, and I liked how they got along. However, two big problems in this book for me. One, you guys know I am not into science in books. It never reads authentically. It's always like silly conversations that just do not happen with academics. They have these super highbrow conversations about everything within science and technology, and I just don't like it in books. It just rubs me the wrong way. So that was one of the things going wrong for it. The other thing is that the whole book is basically the miscommunication trope over and over and over again for absolutely no reason. So I was not in love with this one. I thought it was a little bit on the boring side. The novella Beautiful Bombshell takes place in between Beautiful Stranger and Beautiful Player, and this is just a night out in Vegas, and there was really no point to this novella whatsoever. It was just kind of shameless sex scenes. We get it. All of these characters are super into each other. Point made. The novella was unnecessary. There is another novella in between after Beautiful Player, which I have been reading, called Beautiful Bride. Spoilers for one of the relationships. And honestly, I'm like almost done it, and I don't even think I'm gonna finish it. I just don't care anymore. There might be 2 more books in this series, and they just don't interest me at all. I think I've done it with this series. It had some good moments. It's very good smut, but I'm good. And then the final book that I most recently read was She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. This was a little bit of a letdown for me. I am going to do a full review, so stay tuned for that. I have some thoughts. General feeling is, I feel like I'm missing something that everyone else really, really loved about this book. This was a story, in case you haven't heard, although this has been one of the most marketed books I've seen, definitely since being on BookTube. And this is about a girl who has a brother who receives like a prophecy that he's going to have a great destiny. And her destiny is essentially nothing at all. And when the brother dies, she decides to take over his identity in order to steal his destiny of greatness. It is a historical fantasy, very light on the fantasy. I'll go more into that in my full review. And it is sort of a queer retelling of the formation of the Ming Dynasty. But essentially, I just didn't really find anything gripping about this story whatsoever. At no point did I feel hooked and sucked into the story in the way that I usually do with other books. I actually was able to put this book down in the middle of scenes. Like in the middle of an ongoing scene, stuff is happening, I could just put this book down and walk away. You know what? In a different mood, I probably could have easily DNF'd this and just totally forgotten about it. It is sort of a military book, but also not really. There aren't really that or like any battle scenes. And I almost would go so far as to say there aren't even really any strategizing scenes either. It just sort of is like they're in the military and there's military stuff going on, but we get almost no description about what that entails other than the final result each time and its political implication. There were some very poignant moments, there were some shocking reveals and some very emotional scenes as well, but overall, I was just left with that feeling of like, what am I missing? Why did everyone like this so much? The one thing that I do think was done quite well was the identity and queer components. I thought it was very representative and it took me a little bit of time. I feel like I missed a lot of the points the first time, but I've read a lot of reviews that put certain elements into perspective for me and I can appreciate what it was doing here. But ultimately the story just didn't grip me whatsoever and I think it was okay, I guess. Okay, well those are all of my recent reads. I will from now on check in with you on a recent read video after every 5 books so I can do a little bit of a wrap up. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear what you thought. Let me know down below, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.